to book up with him just for the whole shop to.
Selvin.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Am I audible?
You are audible, sir. Do you think we can contact the speaker whether she has joined or not? I don't know.
Now I'm trying to contact her. She's joining.
Okay, because we want to know which ID from she is joining. Because
I'll tell her.
Okay, because maybe she has to include her name in the ID. Okay.
Ma'am, could you? Ma'am, could you add your name in the ID? Selvin, do you hear me? Hello. Selvin, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, please go ahead.
But no, she is not able to share her screen. It says host has disabled the screen sharing.
No, we are. Yeah, I am working on that. I should know from what ID she has joined.
Suma,
I will make
Dr. Suma.
Dr. Suma.
Dr.
Okay.
Suma, yes. Dr. Suma.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just finding out. Yeah, Dr. Suma. I will make her a co-host.
Yes.
And I have to make you also, I think. No. She should not share anything now. Yeah, once after you introducing the speaker.
To check whether her screens are being shared.
No, she can share now because I have made her a co-host. I have to make you a co-host. Give me 1 or 2 minutes.
Dr. John Seher, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, doing good.
Ma'am, you can come on. Actually, he's helping you now. Yeah, Dr. Selvin is helping you now.
Yeah. Dr. Dunstan.
Yes.
PowerPoint and spread of the
Dr. Dunstan, from what ID you have joined?
Just HP. My name is not there.
No, that's
Oh,
so.
No, don't worry. Don't make me a host and all that. I'll just
No,
introducing the guest. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine. Okay.
See to it that our resource person's ID is coming properly.
No, I have done that.
Okay.
So Sam Surya, I have made you a co-host, and Narmada, I have made you a co-host. And ma'am, do not share your screen now. Ma'am?
Ma'am, don't scare you. Don't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it has come. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, let's wait for 7 more minutes because it's just 6:23. Once the clock strikes 30, we will start the meeting.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Selvin.
Good evening, all. We'll start the session shortly. Let us wait for the others to join.
Sam, it is 6:30.
Yes, sir. We'll start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of our webinar series on emerging trends in humanities. I hope you have enjoyed the week 1 and week 2. Now we are in week 3, and we do have a special lecture on memory studies, trauma, heritage, and cultural memory. To begin with, I request Dr. V. Selvan, our convener, to give us a welcome note. Sir, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Sam. A very good evening and a warm welcome to each one of you, students, research scholars, faculty members, and friends of the humanities joining us from across India and around the world. It is my joy and privilege to welcome you to the third session of our international webinar series on emerging trends in humanities, organized by the Department of English, St. Joseph University, Dindivanam. St. Joseph University stands as a proud unit of the DMI Foundation's Chennai, the philanthropic mission of the DMI Sisters, the Daughters of Mary Immaculate and collaborators, and the MMI Fathers, the Missionaries of Mary Immaculate. This mission was founded in 1984 by our visionary founder and chancellor, Reverend Father Dr. J. Arulraj, with a single guiding charism, loving God and serving the poor. From that humble beginning, the mission today serves in 13 countries across India, Africa, Europe, and the Americas, transforming lives through education, healthcare, and community development. We begin this evening by expressing our profound gratitude to our beloved founder and chancellor for his blessings upon this series, and our sincere thanks to our respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. V. Subbiya Bharati, and our Registrar, Dr. M. Muthukandan, for their constant encouragement and support that make academic initiatives like this one possible. My special thanks go to Dr. Professor G.M. Joseph Dunstan for his motivation, and encouragement, and the brain behind this webinar series. Our university itself embodies the breadth of modern knowledge. Our schools span the entire arc of human inquiry, from the humanities and languages through commerce, management, law, the sciences and engineering, to medicine and the health sciences, and onward to the frontiers of artificial intelligence, data science, and cybersecurity. It is precisely this multidisciplinary character that gives this series its home. At St. Joseph University, the ancient questions of the humanities and the newest technologies of our age study side by side. This international webinar series carries that spirit outward. Over 15 Saturdays from July to October, leading voices open windows onto the ideas reshaping the humanities today. The digital turn, the global and decolonial turns, and the urgent conversations linking literature, memory, medicine, and the environment to the world we live in now. Every season is open to all. Every session is open to all. Registration is free, and certificates are provided free of cost for those who fill the feedback form. Because our purpose is simple and generous, to create an open international space where students, scholars, and the curious public can think together. And this evening, that international spirit takes living form. Our topic is memory studies, trauma, heritage, and cultural memory, how societies remember and forget, how the past is preserved, contested, and mobilized in the present. And our distinguished speaker comes to us from our own global family, Dr. Sumati K. Sripati, Associate Professor of English at DMI St. Eugene University, Zambia, a sister institution of the DMI Foundations on the African continent. Her presence tonight itself is a beautiful expression of the very theme she addresses: memory, heritage, and connection across cultures and continents. Dear participants, please keep your questions coming in the chat throughout the session. We will take them in the discussion that follows the special address. And now, with great pleasure and warm anticipation, I welcome every one of you here.
Thank you, sir, for that warm words of welcome. I now request Dr. G.M. Joseph Dunstan, our co-convener, to introduce the resource person for us. Sir, the podium is yours.
Dunstan, sir, are you there? Dunstan, sir?
So no.
No, 1 second. Let me check. Hello, Dunstan, sir?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah, please.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir. You are loud and clear.
Yeah, you're audible, but your video is not on.
Okay. Right. Yes.
Yeah, now everything
You're
is
able to
fine.
see me
Go
now.
ahead, sir.
Right. I'm sorry
Yes.
because there is some problem with unmuting me there.
Yeah.
No problems. Okay. Now, Dr. K. Sumati Sripati, the present speaker of memory studies today, she teaches in DMI St. Eugene's University, Zambia. At the outset, let me acknowledge with gratitude her father, Dr. Sripati's contribution to the field of English language and literature when he was a professor of English in Madurai Kamaraj University. When I started my career as a lecturer in English in the year 1981, I was mentored by him because he was my professor and he came for the inspection to introduce BA English literature in my college. Today, I tell you, Dr. Sumati treads on the legacy left by her father, Dr. K. Sripati, who was a great master in the field of English language and literature. I know there are plenty of students who are serving as professors of English in many of the colleges in both MS University and MK University, and also in other universities all over India. And I feel proud to say that Dr. Sumati also has left a lasting impression in the field of English literature and in the field of education in DMI group of institutions in the Central Africa. And I'm sure many of the students in Central Africa are grazing the pastures of the green pastures of English language and literature in Central Africa. She has put in more than 43 years of service and she has published 27 Scopus indexed papers, presented 25 papers in various multidisciplinary conferences. To her credit, she has 4 books. She has got 2 masters in education and MS in education management. Her PhD thesis is on the hours of Kamala Das, a critical appreciation of creativity, Mallory's vision, anatomy is destiny, schizophrenia and confessional more, love, lust and sex, and consummate art. So far, she has guided 75 PG projects, 90 UG projects. And I would even say that she is one of our assets in the Zambia University, DMI, St. Eugene's University. So, my dear beloved participants, get ready to draw from the well of literary knowledge of Dr. Sumati K. Sripati. Dr. Sumati, the virtual platform is yours now. Over to you. Yes?
Ma'am, you have to unmute your...
Yes.
Sam, can you hear ma'am speaking?
Sir, no, sir.
Okay. Ma'am, there is no audio. Please unmute yourself. Ma'am, we couldn't hear you. Yeah, try speaking. It looks like you unmuted yourself. Try speaking, ma'am. I think try speaking. Your unmute. Ma'am, we couldn't hear you.
Now speak, ma'am.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear, ma'am. Please go ahead. Welcome to the webinar.
Screen. Yes. Just a minute, please. Let me.
Yeah.
Oh.
Slide movie. It's not. I have to go here.
Yes.
Okay. I'm feeling elated to be here this evening with you all. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I should say it's good evening for every one of you here, while it is afternoon here. And I'm feeling elated and feeling very happy to be amidst you all. And my special reverence and pranams to our founder, Chancellor Dr. J. Arulraj, for having initiated this particular webinars, and the special reverence and gratefulness at the beginning, at the foremost, to all of the scholarly elite people of the University of St. Joseph at Dindivanam, Tamil Nadu. And my special greetings to all the dignitaries of the day, inclusive of the Chancellor, the departmental heads, and all the people who are there here today. And special gratefulness and my humble salutations to Dr. Joseph Dunstan. And I feel proud to be amidst you all today. It's only because of him, and he has made it happen this day, since it's been a lineage that he has been speaking. And yes, of course, blood is thicker than water. And here goes the credentials of my parents into me, and that I confer it to you all. And a hearty welcome to every one of you, feeling elated of the opportunities that you have given me and to be with you at that moment and this moment. And before I go ahead, all the greetings to everybody and all the protocols observed, and my reverence to the mighty God above who has made me be here this day with you all. And as the topic of the day goes with memory studies, and it is a dedication to the Department of English of the University of St. Joseph's, I do feel maybe a bit of the talk would impress someone there, of the scholars of the research at the lowest level of my identity, and to the highest of all the scholars who are there working. And in terms to memory studies, in relational identity to trauma, heritage, and cultural memory. Memory is always getting to be lost nowadays because people don't read books. They don't want to think about reading a book. So reading a book by itself is getting to be into the memory of our living standards. What I feel is none of the youngsters prefer to read a book. They feel there is GPT or the Gemini or all the artificial intelligence, and they click on to them and they write a word on it, and then everything of what they want comes to them. So then this particular slides, all the slides that I have prepared, I have gone with books because they are the memories of different authors around the world, and all the scholars have been so much impressed by the writing of everybody, bringing the past into the present. It is not even the past, it is never dead. It is still living. As says William Faulkner, an American writer, in his Requiem for a Nun, right? And every slide I would have placed the book because I would love to tell something of a memory from that particular book. And it is something that we live to know. But those were the days when we all grew only with the books. From 1961, maybe from 63 or 64, we started to read. It was only books and books and books. But nowadays, none of the scholars or none of the children love to touch a book. So this particular my memory studies would be handling a lot of books, though I will not be talking much on theories or psychoanalysis or what we call as behaviorism, things like that, which will also touch about memory. But every book that it is taken in, I would love to say it is an interdisciplinary reliance to our learning. That is what I do feel, and hence I go about with all my 30 slides for another 1 hour and a half or 15 minutes to keep you entertained. And any crossover that you want to do as I speak, yes, please, you can always raise your hands and I can click on to listen to you. So then when it comes to a memory, it is something to live in its remembrance. That is a Brazilian proverb. It says to remember is to live. And memory is a vicarious experience. I'm sorry, there is a word slip in my typing. It is Ara there. Okay, says John Dewey, an educationist of almost, what do we say, significance. John Dewey's identities of many activities to be involved is one such book reading in smaller units. So here comes the thought of how people those days kept running with the nursery rhymes to be kept as a memoriter, to repeat and repeat and repeat to get the reading readiness of words, as well to go about with the fairy tales like Thumbelina or Hansel and Gretel, or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, etc. So it is a vicarious experience, the dreamy imaginations that it gives. But I do not know how it is now. So I would love to touch upon the thought of the scholars to go with a book each day, at least for 10 minutes, that they become highly relevant to the realism of language and literature. So according to Sivan Woodward, a twilight zone that lies between a living memory and a written history is one of the favorite breeding places of mythology. Yes, naturally, every epic that was written was a recollection or a re-happening or re-representing of something of a mythic exuberance that was brought into the twilight zone of a memory, of a thought process. We dream and realize. Some of us sometimes think of being in that fantasy world just to keep ourselves forget the worries and the challenges of the present. So memory, to a larger extent, as a study, as a schema, can also be one of a revelation to keep ourselves happy. Then, according to George Orwell, who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. And that has become the culture of memory, or a memoria cultural. And it can be taken in as one in the book like Trauma Year Memoria Cultural, written by Janet Reinsteder. It is a vital interdisciplinary handbook, we should say, interdisciplinary. It explores how deeply rooted traumas from conquest, slavery, or dictatorship and exile are processed, inherited, and represented, right? It is again a kind of a relevance from a region of a Latin American speaking people of Spanish origin. So it is a collective memory, it is a transgenerational trauma, it is a regional scope that this book gives us a lot of idea of ancient ideologies to the present, and that we try to live in the rhythm of cultural memories of origin. In the book of cultural memories of origin, like it is again on a reference to trauma and memory and imagery in African American context, and the narratives are there as an experiential identities, right? Frank Wilker's monographitis. Every page has got a kind of a relevance to the transatlantic slave trade that was taken as an analogy, a thoughtful analogy of generational trauma right? And that gave in a lot of relevance to Black, what do we say, identity. And the Black identity, it is that because of the melanin is maximum in the skin color came the Black. But people forget to think that it is that Black in every one of us prominently keeps us more to the immune boosting system. It keeps us more healthy than the fair skinned, which is less of melanin pigmentation. So a cultural memories of origin talks about the representational challenges. This is also one such identity, and portraying, what do we say, de-racialization. Discrimination came rise to racialism, right? So there is de-racination of the African people, resulting in cultural rupture, right? Trauma and identities. And there are a bit of theoretical implied notions of trauma, like how Kathy Carroth has represented her thought processes on trauma to a larger extent. So it becomes a collective memory, and that has become aesthetically observed in this particular book of cultural memories of origin. So then a relevance of a book is always that will tell us of how we have so much of values in our relevance to our expression. That is how a book reading makes it precisely a memory that never can forgotten. For example, we were taught the nursery rhymes of the age-old past when we started our school from 1964, if I would say. Very much rhymes of the Jack and Jill is still there, but none of the present day world remembers that. It gave us a lot of thought process of imagining how they would climb up the mountain, get a fetch of bucket of water. The memory still lingers on how they tumbled down and how the head got broken. All these are remembering. So then memory is nothing else but remembering, recalling, recollecting, and representing and representing to a larger extent of all that has been observed into the identity or as a phenomena to be spoken about. There comes the different kinds of relevances. It can be a trauma represented, it can be an agony and anxiety. Then all these collectively taken as a memory of, and how it has touched upon the culture of the people, and how post-colonialism to a larger extent has worked into the memory studies, and later on, and how it has become a heritage of a thought process. So our everyday language, okay, of the past should make us aware that it hides what it claims to reveal. Yes, naturally, it will be still existing in many areas of our thought process. It is just that it keeps us being aware of that particular sequence, but we try to hide in our everyday existence. The good of the memory we always try to carry. The bad we try to let go, which is how we exist. So the prefix re, ara, is highlighted to mark an awareness of the historical processes and the passage of time that has taken place for the action, and how it is in relevance to the present involving the past. How it is being the present is that the books give us the knowledge, oral traditions give us the knowledge, everybody's spoken identity of a relevance brings that into a communicative relevance, which is how we do remembering, putting together a particular sense of what has happened in a community and what has given to the split and how it has got to reorganize. Herein, I would love to say Gugi's Tionga's writing The River Between, the novel, you will have how the particular sense of community, how they were all friends together, and how during colonialism, one group of people preferred to take up or adapt to the lives of the Western white race or the white race culture, while the other group wanted to be traditionally encompassed and didn't want to move out from their traditional breakups. For example, Tionga, living in that part of the Kenyan tribe, didn't even want to write in English. He wrote in his own mother tongue language. And he found that his intricate writing of a story sequence never got to be sold. Not much of the books could be sold. But then he came to identify himself to say, learning of the language English and writing in English would predominantly make him universal. And that is how he was remembered as a very fine post-colonial or a colonial writer, and a lot of research has been done on him. We still remember that impact, what has been broken apart and how it can be reorganized. Recalling in issuance, oftentimes in ritual contexts, right? We try to retrieve selected aspects of the past. There are the cultural background for that memory to linger on. The religious-based identities, how each of the religion has got their own issuance of many of the habitual ceremonies or habits, selected aspect of the past for certain identities of their existence. And that is again referred in writing. And it cannot be lost forever. What it was 1,000 years before, or a decade before, or 100 years, a century before, many of the relevances we still bring into the focus, recalling. Recollecting, it's again a narrative ordering. You have to know every writer, every African writer, if you would take, or every an Asiatic writer, or an Oriental, or a European writer, or a Western English writer, or an American writer. They have taken in different ideas, ordering of dispersed, disparate, unrelated events into a cohesion. That is how a story narration is brought into a focus, and it needs to be understood that that has given a intermingling of different aspects that can be represented. That is what do we call as presenting and performing what was presented in the past, and make it as a depiction into the realism of the everyday reality. And then what do we understand of the external present? Suppose if there is something of an external or an eternal identity of a cosmic glory, a mythic revelation, or even a divine occult sensibility, it is brought in from a past imaging difference identity, depicted in a past imagining in a different way of imagining difference, right? We all have to understand, if only you would read many of the readings or writings of many of the Nigerian writers. There's one book called Concubine. Here, the re-representing of identities was in such a form, when we do read, we can always feel that there is a kind of a representation of those beliefs or superstitions that has been checked upon in what do we call as a revelation there in that storyline to that of what is in practice in India. Yes, it is rhythmic. And you need to know whatever it is, every word of the RE that we are putting forward in the memory studies can be what has happened in a particular identity of a nation or an area, and then comes a collective assemblage of relevance. Author G. Neal, in his book, National Trauma, he gives us the major crisis, and this is again an American writer, about the September 9th, 2011, 9/11 episodic happening, which touched upon every American psyche, right? A compelling look of how society processes mass grief and loss was identified in that book, okay? And how the sudden disruptions, all of a sudden it has happened. The Twin Towers broke down on millions of people, and the post happenings of that particular 9/11 episode. And what happened was, it became a shared narrative. It became a history to be remembered always, ingrained into the cultural memories of the people of that particular period. And it is still remembered. It's a decade ago, but it is still remembered. It's because of its constructive rhythm, or what we call as a constructive schema, or an identity that it has expanded, which has created a kind of an inherent traumatic experience by nature, by the very thought of it into a human sensibilities. And also there is a kind of a shifting sensation of certain clans and groups being, and it has become a symbolic event of its relevance, and it is still spoken about, right? And we need to have to understand how certain identities of the past tend to become a memory, and the memory is everywhere. One little reverence of what we think about, right? And it is intended to be used metaphorically in the sense like how it can be a recap of many lovely moments to life. But it sometimes says it is a false concreteness, some imaginary thought processes of somebody's memory comes into a revelation or a revealing identity that has to be deciphered by everybody who comes to know about it. Yet you need to know, whatever it is, the work of Gilroy in his celebrated work, The Black Atlantic, he says the plantation slavery that existed those days in the mid 18 and the 19th century, middle 19, early 19, retained a central place in the historical memories of the Black Atlantic, and it is still there as a trauma and a memory. And we all have to understand how the cultural has had its own impact. The culture of Black Americanism or Africanism had its own negation, but one thing, the people of Africa, I live in Zambia, they are just that solemn, calm, placid, humane people, I should say, being here for 13 long years. I wish to say that the culture is foremost of such beautiful sentiments with so much of decorum to good dignity to labor, in the sense like it's not only work but to the happenings of thought expression of everyday life reality. The attitudes, the beliefs, the language, custom, rituals, behavior, the religious faith, the kind of the food of such simplicity, and all their folklore identities has given them a culture that can be turned around and looked upon. I would not have imagined a contrast of a crisscross movement from one part of the world to another when I moved into the mid of the world to Africa. I never could think. I had a cultural shock, I should say, personal thought process of a memory when I moved from Singapore down here. It was such a I was blindfolded. Just that because I believed the faith that it is going to be fine and I'm going to serve the world. It was an forced, what do we say, move for me. Otherwise, I would not have. But whatever it is by nature of relevance that it should happen. It had happened. A factual event, a metaphorical identity of a thought process. But then you need to know the symbolic weight on me coming over here was the kind of the people with whom I would work persistently, if I would say, in my memory. I would go to live here for a longer period of time. It's so secure, so pleasant, and so vibrant in the process of caring for one another. This memory is literary by nature, is by Connie Palman. And he says that particular memory that takes one person into the identification of lingering on to, if at all an author writes a story, memory, okay, and trauma and memory, they become what do we call as the brain and body in search, or what do we call as a clinical or a legal controversies put into an identity. Black Atlantic was one that can be taken as a controversial legal expression where people would have fought. But why? When I said they did not do, they succumbed to the white race because they felt that they are here so divine grace to bring them up. But later on they overcame, but still at the beginning. So this book, Trauma and Memory, will give you an exploration of an discovered or recovered memory identities, right? Bringing in cognitive neurobiological, developmental, and psychodynamic perspectives of its expression in this particular book. Why it is neurodynamic, neurobiological? There is that word clinical. Every memory has got a touch on the brain. There is the short-term memory or the long-term memory that comes to reading identity or learning identity. But how does our brain work on? There are certain areas of the brain that will permanently keep messages stored, and that the reactions will take place over a period of time. Some may forget certain happenings forcefully, but then not everybody can forget certain irksome situation that they are in or that they are facing in. So then that comes in as a memory. You have to know every memory gives a identity of a realism that becomes constructive, that can be reconstructed, restructured. So then this Black Atlantic by Gilroy is a memory of a slave experience, right? It was recalled, readdressed. Most of the African authors would not have touched upon slavery, but there are some South African writers who do that, and used as an additional supplementary instrument with which to construct distinct interpretation of modernity. The modern world doesn't know about what slavery is unless there is forced, what do we call as ill treatment. Okay, that has become a psychological problem around the world. But then modernity doesn't know the hardship faced by our predecessors of the age-old past. At this moment, if we would take into an ethnographer, ethnic writer, writing of ethnicity of an area, and grapher, because he designs and writes on that graphic presentation, Roger Bastide, African religious consciousness, survival in Brazil, right? That identity of a thought process by him is on the slavery related workers of the plantations, right? And at the same time, this explicit expression has been taken as one that is a forgotten memory by Nora, laments that history as eclipsed memory. Eclipse is something shadowing off, right? At the same time, Nora's extensive identity as a French national on the national memories of happenings in his writings in the late 19th century, right, towards the 20th century, restored the realism of memory. What do we call as a realism of a thought process that would say, would become the realms of memory of the French past. So every memory of an ethnographer would be that particular ethnic identity, a recollection of memory of many historical happenings brought to focus to modernity is through their books that we come to know. We are not standing in as evidences there because we never know. For example, many of the cultural bonding and what do we say, identity of each one's existence would have been impact on migration or an impact of war or an impact of somebody's dominance in an area, right? During the World War II, after World War I, Korea had the impact of Japanese. Even now, the Korean people will not forget, because every family there was a old person, a grandmother or a great grandmother who suffered a lot in the hands of the Japanese militarism. Now, even to that core, they have not forgotten. If you would go to Korea, talk about Japan, they will not love. They may do business. Even in a business, if they're going to buy some products from Japan for a constructive analysis, they will engage one interpreter. Maybe if I was working for Hyundai Rotem, I was working to talk to a Japanese person to get some gangways for a train division. Why? They didn't want to talk to them. They still remembered what had happened to their families. Historical happenings brought into the focus to modernity, not only by writing, but also by their expressional attitudes. right? And so here I have brought in the focus of two books here. See, the Landscapes of Memory by this is here again. You see here, this particular picture by itself denotes the fact. I'm very sorry, my dear friends, my slide has become little larger by a click of something. I'm not able to put it into form, so that's why I'm pushing it up and down. Here you can see this is a trauma or a space and a history of some embedded area. Maybe Pompeii. If you imagine, Pompeii would not have had cause. The city of Pompeii, how it went under the Roman city, Italian city, went under the earth due to the bursting of Mount Vesuvius. What do we say? Not extinct, not an extinct, not a dormant. It is an active volcano. The similar is that the landscapes of memory also tell us many things that has happened around the world, and that is again a trauma of a revelation. And you need to have to understand there's another book by Memory, Trauma, Treatment and the Law, right? Memory, trauma, treatment and the law, which will always tell us about a similarity to the existence of the thought process, how our body and mind have taken that particular happening and it remains unforgotten within us. And maybe certain things are getting to be organized in such a way that there is a message for me. Excuse me, I do not know how. Let me go about with my content and then come back. HR has sent a message, Himanshi. Can anybody address, please? Hello? Am I there?
Yes, ma'am.
Are we there? Okay. Am I too fast or it's okay? Actually, I'm very slow, I feel. Is it okay, doctor?
Ma'am, yes, it is well and good.
Okay, fine. So then the concept and the focus on memory, before I go with the divisions of memories and impact of memories, what I do feel like the focus on memory with the idea of getting beyond the culture and history, right? So then whatever it is, the newer inventions, all the attributes go to the resource of what has been in stock in memory from the age-old past. Sometimes memory becomes like a thought that we laze around. You try to sleep on your couch or in your bed, you start to think a lot, then it becomes intellectual laziness, I do feel. So then it tries to have an impact or what do we say, an implied motive to our relevance, and that touches on the psychological inner states. Many of us still live in certain fears, certain conscious thoughts of many things that would have happened some 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, but still. But then it is then a psychologist, Connaughton, a writer, educationist, he says that memory is becoming a habit, right? And that habit certain times become the gesture and the bodily posture. Some gestures and bodily postures, that becomes a collective social memory. Every replica or a thought of, if you would see the Greek picture of Zeus, god Zeus, Zeus, and even Hercules, there is that form, there is the bodily posture, which is a collective social memory, right? And that becomes a vehicle that is effectively carrying the rhythm of that particular group of relevances as solidarity. As solidarity is not all hands together to work together, but the thoughts and the impact, it becomes a part of functionalism. If you would read through the writings of Durkheim, he talks about two types of solidarity: functional solidarity and organic solidarity, right? It is a part of philosophy which embeds the memory and the thought of ourself from the age-old past. That becomes the memory in mind and culture. If it is to be in the words of Prager, it is something of an embodied sentiment, actively engaged in constructing And selfhood, excuse me, let me pause a bit, please. Extremely sorry, I had a hitch. So then I had to take little water. I'm sorry. So then whatever it is, our self-food is our realizing of our life at that moment of our existence, and how it becomes a part of a reflection of the past, what we are having as habits, right? What we are having as different identities of expression all come from the cultural background or the things that has been taught to us from age old past, from childhood. What we have learned at 5 is what we are at 50, is a very, very proverbial metaphorical identity, because it comes from that bond and there is that memory, right? And you need to know, in that book on memory in mind and culture by Pascal Boyer, it's a very, very, very important identity, and by James, I do say the word identity because it bridges the gaps between cognitive, psychological, and anthropological, right? And you need to have to understand how this anthropology, the history, the study of the past, and all the excavations are all left behind memories, as that can be kept in museum, that becomes the heritage. That is again a constructive embodiment of what it is, combining shared collective memories, where we shape our self-identity, construct historical awareness. This book talks about all such things, and it makes interesting reading to the present world scenario. And for any research scholar, it is a matter of fact of how every memory, it can be traumatic, it can be a cultural base or historical happening, or it can be a heritage. If you go to a museum, you see there can be different things. It is again a memory that you recollect. Relational relevance. Look at how individuals and communities remember everything of the past. They do not forget. And so then without forgetting, they retell the past. And you know how literature becomes a key site for that particular work. Literature holds that relevance. Every literary piece, every fiction has got a lot of the past brought into the focus. Sometimes it is like a metafiction, where the story has got a story within, where the protagonist uses I for the reflection of the memory, right? So then is rarely just the background. It is the plot, character, narrative form, and ethics. And here you can see the book Critical Trauma Studies. And here you see it has got both personal reality and as a learning lesson for an academic performance, understanding violence, conflict, and memory in everyday life. As far as India is concerned, every day sometimes become a memory in our lives because of the violence, and specifically to the women as a gender. The protection that is to be, is getting to become violent at certain scenarios, right? In spite of all the highly qualified existence that we have in our nation. Bridging the gap between the lived suffering and the scholarly inquiry is all that is on critical trauma study. So the relational relevance of a memory study, where the key site of the work talks about the multidisciplinary scope of the real world. So then a lot of case studies can be taken in from here. So then theory and the experience are also part of that particular memory. And pretty fine, I read a very elite and highly knowledgeable paperwork from a scholar from Chennai. There is a College of Memory Studies. I was so surprised by that. And I'm sorry, I failed to take note of that, but I have it on my desk. That article, you won't believe. He used the word, every word that he used for every 5 to 6 lines was so very different. It's not that very catchy or common, like how do I speak, but it was so differential at a high flown standards. He says memory is knottedness or knottiness. It is not NAUGHT, it is knotted, woven, KNOTTI. So then it is a collective revelation of thought. And when I did do a lot of reading on memory studies, you won't believe memory also give rise to a lot of resilience when you try to overcome the trauma. They serve as a resilience is one that we learn to adapt. So cultural and collective memory, where you need to know Maurice Halbwachs and Jane and Halidia Hasman, they're highly theoretical writers, right? They say, we don't remember alone. We refer many things of the past. And there comes literature which stores and transmits all the values, all the traumas, all the myths, all the episodic happenings, all the identities of an experience that is being felt, right? And sometimes it becomes like, if you take Rwanda in 1991, they had a genocide. It became a national narrative. But the same Rwanda, if you would go, it's one of the beautiful nations of Africa. So clean, so well patterned, evolved. No one would know. And that is becoming a national narrative. There are so many family stories, monuments, and silences which has been held because of that particular happening, right? So then you need to know how the two books that I have referred here, Companion to Cultural Memories and Understanding Resilience, both of them will tell us about how we try to look into the prospects of having them to support our existence in the fact that we have faced a kind of agony, for the matter of fact, would tell us about how we would try to reflect on that particular reference. Okay, with that thought, moving to the next slide, which talks about a kind of another form of a memory. It's a narrative memory. A narrative memory is from an individual writer. The protagonist stands for the author or the authoress individual. Here, you need to know Paul Ricoeur distinguish memory as representation from memory as narration. We need to have to understand that, right? So then you need to know memory as narration is nothing else but something of an individual person's representation of a happening. If, for example, if you start to read a lot of Nigerian writers, every writer would have had the Biafra civil war that took place in 1960, memory as narration, showing how telling a story changes what is remembered. They have been extrapolating on that particular visionary thought and try to readdress it as a literary identity. The act of narration itself, it is again a form of remembering something of the past, bringing into a relevance of the present modernity and reshaping it. For example, even if we take Adichie Chimamand's writing, what she experienced when she was an young girl. Now she is settled in America, but she visits Nigeria every year. She's a living writer. Okay, all a traumatic experience, migrational, transgressional traumas, right? Discrimination, racialism, and the very thought of our own nation always always unstable or an instability due to civil wars. Even now it happens, but it is a very foremost country in terms to language, English literature. So remembering and reshaping has been foremost done at the maximum over here, right? And you need to know this narrative memory can also reflect on the differential identities of what we call as trauma and the post memory. This post memory leads to heritage. It is leading to a texture of memory or antiquities of memories as a storage to keep it as a memory, imagined, sequenced realism, I should say. Any memory that is as an antiquity being preserved, an antique piece of a work of the ancient past, right? How they are kept in special places in museum. They become a heritage site, heritage areas and heritage images, right? Kathy Carroth and Marianne Hirsch, these both are also a highly influential theorists of trauma and memory writing, right? And they know trauma disrupts chronological memory. The timeline is affected. So the fiction that arises out of that timeline uses fragmentation, repetition, and gaps. And that is being patched up with the storyline through the different characters which take up the, prominence of its realism. Right? Certain characters keep repeating, coming. Some are fragmented pieces of their own schizophrenic identity. Even at this point of view, if I would say, my thesis that doctor had referred in this beginning, overs of Kamala Das, over, you need to know the full concise work had so much of trauma there, so much of schizophrenia there, so much of ill-treating being taken in, and all her memories of the past only brought into the expression of 39 works of literary pieces. She was a highly condemned writer, but if you would go through her lines in the present scenario, what she had reflected in the past, as in a post memory, is a realism. It still happens. Later generations remember events they would not have lived through, but now they are also experiencing it through that particular reading, and trying to comprehend and decipher the realism that existed then and how it is at the moment now. Right? So then you need to know stories, images, and literature are also the paramount relevances for memory. So this memory as a sequence is also politicalized. When you take in the memory of the past of colonialism, right from India to Africa and to very, very, many, many countries, right? So then you need to know how they impinged upon the traditions, right? And then how they would try to enforce their imperialistic views and thoughts. Lockean and Proustian traditions, that's the basis of selfhood. These two are very ancient, or what do we say, earlier writers of literature. They said memory is by itself the base of a person's existence, and that is what is reflection to life as well as his writing. There is a kind of a character identity, right? They either choose to recall or repress, try to forget it or negate it, or try to bring out another force of an existence. That is something is important, but you need to have to understand you can never forget a memory of the past unless you're becoming numb about it. Forgetting is sometimes it's letting go of what that has been a hard sentiment. It takes time, but it is not failure, right? But then it is taken as a kind of a case study where it can be ethical, political, or psychological. We know there are people being troubled. We do not know, even at the present time, that when we're talking about memory studies of trauma, heritage, and culture and whatnot, there may be some kind of a trauma somewhere, politicalites, right? Yes, the Gomati PK says, time as a healer. Yes, that's why I said it is not a failure, but then how much we take into our minds to accept it, right? You need to know which version of the past that we can trust and rely on, which portion or the version of the present that we are existing, and how careful our existence is. So then we need to have to think about all such relevances, because there are so many unreliable relevances. That's why memory cannot, it sometimes becomes a fault concreteness, which we have to accept, right? Here, this Memory and Politics of Identity, a book, also talks about the critical relevance of how something of a hardship that has happened remains as a heritage to be remembered always. Like for India, if I would take in post-colonialism, 1857, how there was that shooting by that particular Captain Dyer, at the people who were assembled to protest, had satyagraha or something. You won't believe, protest against imperialism of the English. They jumped into the well. Doesn't the well remain there? It is still there. It is a memory. It is a heritage. It is a political identity. So whenever we read a book, how we try to put itself into a kind of a conscious revelation of our own self, so then we know how that has become a study. You know, the literary precepts, right? How a narrative techniques can be adapted. Even you, when you start to write, what kind of a consciousness that you can take into reflect on is you need to have to identify. You really have to dwell to certain authors and how they consciously brought in certain identities of happenings or reflections into their narration. You need to know, right? Examples. If you would take, before I would go with the techniques of what all these are, right? Thank you, ma'am, Abby. Pachinko, right? This particular writing by Min Jin Lee is an epic. It talks about a Korean family. I did reflect on Korea because when I did visit and work there for some time, as a project manager, personalizing, please don't mistake, it's a memory of recap for everyone to say that you should venture in, not to be academic and also on administrative, when to work in somewhere that will collect many ideas of how your individual techniques of life would be, how you would love to rhythm yourself to an excellence of its existence that God has given us, right? Korea, they still don't like to be friendly with Japanese. Anyone comes to shake hands also, they will not. They keep their hands closed. So this pachinko by itself is an epic of the Korean rhythm of realization of their challenge and difficulties they face over a period of time. This is a story of one particular family meaningfully existed, and how 80 years of their memory and how much of the 80 years they had faced their hardships, right? Because of the Japanese occupation and systemic discrimination, and finally culminating into the World War II, right? It is a metaphorical relevance too for the existence of a human life, the existence of human mind, realizing the fact of how the human condition was. This particular Pashinko is a kind of like Virginia Woolf's stream of consciousness, associative recall, right? Her Woolf's writing is all of stream of consciousness. It was embedded within herself that everything that she experienced, she brought it as an expression, as a stream, like a river flowing down, unstoppable. The analepsis or a flashback is again how you bring the past events into the rhythm of the present. If you would do reading of Nigerian authors or a Kenyan writer, you can see even a Congan writer, you can see the present time is interpreted with the past sequences, how the past intrudes into the rhythm of its expression, and that becomes a narrative because the story that they have started, they are adding up that intrusions into to reflect that this is how the life was, but they don't say, but they talk about that, right? And further on, the frame narrative, this is the form of how to tell a story, right? And the frame becomes the outer conceptual framework, reliability of the inner memory of the author that would be reflected in any one of the characters. And that is a technique of what we call as a frame narrative, where we use that framework, make a design through the memory that is still indelible. It is not being erased. Unreliable narrator, That is because intermittent, you have memory gaps flowing in, right? And then there is a kind of trying to hide our own emotions of realism, self-deception, or deliberate revision of what it was existing. Japanese writer Ishiguro uses this extensively in his writing. In many of the some of the slides, I would have explained their book also. Let me get back and how they have been using memory as a flashcard into their life. So trauma and memory as such will tell us about the clinical controversies and legal identities of neurobiological impact, which you would see in every writer. Now, for thematic concerns, right, English fiction that can be taken for a case study in research for themes on memory studies, some of the writers that what I have read before, I have brought them into focus. For example, stream of consciousness as depicted in the stories of Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. That was a very big theoretical learning in postgraduate studies, right? She models memory on a non-linear and sensory pattern, in the sense like she brings in between, but not monotonously or streamlining it in a steady flow, here and there. Sensory, where there is a sensory reflection. For example, as she is sitting to write, she says in Mrs. Dalloway, if only see the bird flying and flash, it scoops down. Why? The memory from one end flows down into another. That is why she used the metaphor of the bird scooping down. So then she brings in nature. She gets the smell, the sound, the light triggers, the whole scenes of what it is relevant. She brings in, taken as learning, right? There are a lot of questions coming in. Organizers, please do tell them that I shall come back to them around the completion time. I need to go about with another 12, 15 slides. Please help me to complete. I shall.
Yes, ma'am. You may continue with your slides and we can take the questions towards the end of the session, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Doctor, for your understanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
So literary relevance is that memory is not stored like data. It is not empirical. It can be a performance-rated scale of the present, right? Many memories are good. We get a very optimistic existence. If we tend to get bad memories and remain pessimistic, maybe later on neurobiologically you can develop schizophrenia or even bipolar syndromes. It comes automatically. That is how our human body gets to be affected. That is why many elders have certain rituals, just even it is in a funeral or in a grievance, they handle it in such a way, which now the world has become so what do we say, not thinking about one another, interpolating also, they're forgetting now. So then in Dalloway's, during the Clarissa's party, how they were together, where they were talking about thoughts about the World War I and how the youth of those days behaved. Personal memory within public history was put into focus of a relevance to a larger extent, right? So then I'm not touching upon Virginia Woolf's much of the writing, but certain authors of the African relevance, where I love to specialize in African literature, I do bring into focus to you. So Kazuo Ishiguro in some of the slides, but here this Japanese work, The Remains of the Day and Never Let Me Go, how much of the character Stevens in that particular remains. He looks into emotional memory and balances everyday realism of his personal self, of his professionalism. He says that. And it is so ironical that what he remembers is what his self is, and that the people would be able to understand. So then he carries memory every day within him. That has become a habitual mannerism of form and the personality, and also what do we call as the posture. The novel's irony is that Never Let Me Go talks about slowly reconstruct memories of childhood and to understand their fate. Literally, memory can be an act of avoidance as much as recovery. Sometimes we need, that's why I keep using the word let go. Certain harsh sentiments we need to forgive and forget. Forgive and forget gives us better memories to realize, like having a bunch of grapes in hand, juicy and delicious, yummy. The bad memories are like sour grapes, right? Here I brought in a book, Homegoing by Yagashi, right? This Homegoing by Yagashi, again, a recap to the post-colonialism of the slave trade. Yagashi talks about two sisters, where you need to know the remains of the day, tells about two sisters. One is the wife of a very strong colonial person, a colonist, a white race officer, right? She got adjusted to the whims and fancies of the white race man, and she exists very happily, while her own sister was sold in the slave market, right? And you need to know this enslaved girl was taken to America, right? And that the kind of the thematic sweep, the emotional weight is so gruesome to understand that would the world think about this memory? Will the world believe in such things happening? There is some concreteness in that particular story to say it was a traumatic experience that she always reflects to her sister, and the old story goes about with that. And now to the age-old past of the 18th century, Great Expectations, you need to know Pip's the character, right? He brings in memories of his childhood and how he has been treated by Sattle's House, Magavich, and Estella, right? How there is related memory constructs. Constructs are forms. Every verb is a construct. The different parts of the speech, the 8 parts of the speech, each part is a construct, identity, grammatical unit. And that becomes a class identity, if I will say in a grammatical spoken language of Englishes, right? So the different constructs that has been referred are the structural, what do we say, happenings or narration or narratives that the just author, the Charles Dickens, has brought in of the early impressions. And he has revised it to such an extent from the revolutionary period or industrial revolution into a kind of an information as a storyline. And you need to have to understand whatever it is that is we are discussing are also being taken in relevance in certain books. The levers in Lisaku has got some kind of an intimate, sentimental identities of a memory embedded in the storyline. And it is a remarkable book that talks about culture, memory, and the relevance of reading, and where you can get a kind of a reminiscence in order that you would feel you can reconcile and have a resilience to experience. Like each one of us have to learn to medicate ourselves. It is not only meditation. Book reading by itself gives you a lot of meditative identities that makes you get to think a lot, right? In Julian Barnes, The Sense of an Ending, it's the latest, very new 20 years, not even 20 years, just 10 years ago, writing a classic memory study novel, right? And he says it is like a diary that we carry about with us. Ashruta, I will come back to you, but your cure studies you cannot put in here with memory. Maybe that is an experience. Please. Cure is cure, please. So the narrator takes in the thought of how every memory can be as a recollection written in a diary. And when the diary that we carry with us, take with us the good sentiments of the memory, that is what he says, how badly we misread it. If at all we are not able to identify or understand. So a memory is a revision. In a literary pretext, it can be a sample example or a sample that we take into study and to understand. And here in the sense of an ending, how many letters and diaries are becoming the competing versions of the past, and that is how it becomes one that needs to be taken as a relevance of what do we say, a literary identity. We need to have to think about that, right? There and There by Tommy Orange is also an interesting piece of writing where, just like a diary writing, you can say there is traumatic memory there in that, in the sense like it is about the Red Indians of the past, from Wyoming, Dakota region beyond California, and how they moved to California of the westernized area, and what kind of a difference they saw when they were having to understand from the rural to the urban background, complexities of disconnection, left everything behind and came in to realize the Western world is also a bit difficult, cultural identity, generational trauma, as they would feel in a modern scenario of an American context. In this story, I think there are 12 Red Indians. Okay, and the kind of the relevance of a trauma that they have referred here, you need to know, is a quite interesting reading by Tommy Orange. Okay, and here also Juma Lahiri's namesake, an Indian writer. Excuse me. If you would read, all the memories are being interpreted into differential stories. It is like a factional identity of many stories together. Okay, I shall come back in detail later on Jhumpa Lahiri. I don't need to much tell about. A lot of migrational identity by Chitra Mukherjee. Similar identities would be there, and even in as a memory recap, to delve into Africanism of the realism that it is existing, I have taken some 3 relevances as books, but these relevances I have not gone through. But then, in as a memory recap, I said she always takes a recap of memory of her younger days, right? That my friend war, she talks in 3 perspectives in that particular with a half of yellow sun, not in purple hibiscus. 3 characters: Ugo, Olana, and Richard. Olana, the girl, her own, she need to cry a lot, is one particular quotation that I have taken from the book. I would explain in another slide. Maybe I'm coming to the last 10 slides. The technique that it is a literary sensation of a realism that has happened, and where she talks about a multiple focalization. She focuses on a focal point of thought is like the innermost core and concern of an relevance. A multiple focalization where she shows memory is not that one single identity. It is a kind of a reflection of many relevances, and so she takes it into 3 perspectives of how she can put it as the present, the past, and the future, and how it is taken out from the Biafran Civil War, right? And how the families, the nations, even till this day, they remember. It is traumatic for them. So the character, the book inside the novel, writing as memory rescue, is that particular protagonist that she reflects in. And in that, she reconciles to a resilience, right? And you need to have to understand how she brings in every book something of a rhythmic, I should not say rhythmic, it has been a synchronizing identity which has become the rhythm of her writing. That means to say, a stream of consciousness within her is, this is what she tries to imply. Okay, and going to her own elder, Toni Morrison, right? You need to have to know how this Toni Morrison, as a Black American writer of the earlier past, has written of late The Beloved. And this particular story, Beloved, is a beautiful picturization of the, what do we call as traumas of slavery. And this book is being, even in our nation, we use it as one of our very famous fiction for postgraduate studies. Rememory, The past is not past, but the place you can enter where you see something that has happened. The same goes with Maya Angelou too. She too brings the past as a place of livelihood, and that she has been existing throughout to live an exuberant, what do we say, existence of sustenance. You have to read her sustenance of womanhood, a sustainable woman. Similar, they are all compatriots. Alice Morrison, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Maya Angelou. So literary research that they had done, if I would say in Beloved, it is a recap of a collective trauma, a narrative that is to be spoken, and that particular narration has been addressed as that particular beloved, right? That is never to be forgotten. That is what she meant, right? And you need to know, blends magical realism with the historical tragedy. It can be examined and taken in for evidential references. How the past forgets or refuses to stay buried. She says that in Beloved, the past is never buried and you live with the past, right? Horrific memories, right, that cannot be suppressed. They remain as an indelible mark in her mind, and that became the story, right? And whatever it is in literature, right, is not just what character recall. It is how stories are built, how identity is made, and how history is passed down. This is all that is that the reflection of the impact of the major concern, the memory studies, if we take in at a larger pretext. Conceptualized division of the memory study. It talks about collective memory. It is not only one person. All the authors and authoresses have been taking in groups and bringing in many identities of stories that happen at a particular period, brought in into their books and reflected as monuments. So literature keeps the culture alive. Yes, when I do explain this and I've been talking to you, I did prepare this slide in the format of some kind of an interest that would imbibe in you, in your minds. It is not only the trauma or the passivity of the theory, but how it has become realistic through the books. Because books are becoming forgotten. People forget. They go in with cell phone, but not carry a book. Many, very little or very less do that. So trauma and post-memory, the normal memory that is broken is also been a conceptual division, where the fiction doesn't talk only about drama, but how it gaps, repetition, and how it silences it to show it, as in the case of Surfacing by Artwood, Margaret. There is a lot of trauma there. That becomes a post-memory. Events that has been imagined and brought into relevance of its realism. So we need to have to know. Even if we take about Chinua Achebe, Things Fall About, you need to know how he has been talking about similar to Adichie. Adichie is very much a junior. Maybe Chinua Achebe was her mentor. Both have certain memories instilled in their writing of the colonialism, and that has become the tribal, what do we say, earmarked, a symbolic representation, Igbo customs, and how those customs were disrupted due to imperialism. But still they follow, African people, they have not forgotten, they still follow. Even me living in Zambia, there are 72 languages and tribes, and each of them have their own tribal culture. Some of them are cousins and some of them are not cousins. A cousin can only can be very friendly with the cousin. They just are very, very too fondly. But the others, they show respect. That is how it has become a tradition or a memory archive. So most of the African writing tends to become a memory archive, where we have all the proverbs and folk tales. If you would read the storyline of Concubine, you can see so much of folk tales and proverbs. Cultural memory bank, it's so very interesting. I have given some quotes also in the slide from 23 to 24. It is interesting. In there was a country, a direct memory of Bifera, right? Remembering a history is that people forget. Many wanted to forget is still to be remembered, because such a thing can never happen in realism again. That is the intentional value that he gives. So far, we did understand that everything that happened became a memory. Memories are like salt. You add them in the right amount in your food. They are the additives that gives the flavor for your food. But too much will ruin it, says Paul Kilo. He is also a very beautiful writer. All his writing are biblical. Such a lot of divine grace, but here you need to know. He brings all the Old Testament into the pretext of the New. And it is very, very interesting if you read Paul Kilo's very many stories. And I preferably love all scholars if you would spend time to read books, and that becomes a kind of an integral part of your literary learning. If you go to the Congoan writer Ben Okri, you need to know his famished road, right? He uses the abiku, spirit child, to represent a cyclical memory. You can see in this picture. That is abiku, this spirit child. You can see there, right? He is trying to roll the memories of different things. I'm sorry, he is Nigerian. History that keeps repeating, right? From Bifera to the present turns around. Many of the Nigerian fictions are very, very interesting, and not much as research has been done on Nigerian writers. Maybe lately Adichie Chimamanda is coming up. Maybe Achebe is there already, but many has not been looked into, because they look into mythic mystery. Yes, if you read Concubine, I forgot the writer's name. It is such a lot of mythic. It's such an interesting story, right? And the word looks concubine, but till the end you will not know the meaning. Concubine means one who wants to keep another girl in spite of the wife that he has, but it is not so. This is like a tribal race to get to have a girl, and it is so very interesting. But I don't know why he named it concubine. Could have been a better word for it. But then again, it is a kind of a streamline of consciousness for the writer, and everything of what Ben Okri writes is spirited with an unconscious mind, a spirit that dwells, that can be remembered in human sentiments. There's a magical realism of memory, right? And you know that official history can't contain. No, that is, he reimagines every sequence and rewrites them, right? Then we go with the certain identities from Chris Abani in Graceland, right? How she is also an African on the eastern end of African Lagos, and how she gives a memory rhythm, a thought process of recapitulating, is on Elvis. That is the protagonist, right? Who is moving from the village to Lagos. It is similar to There and There, where Tommy Orange tries to talk about the Red Indian habitation, and how they try it very hard to be complex to the urban complexities, how the rural traditions are so very passive against the navigating urban violence. Urbanity is of the modern world, of the comfort zone. So here the memory is a displacement. Migration plays a major role. Migration by itself is like a memory sequence, which can be edited and written as a storyline. So Helen Habila, Waiting for an Angel, there is a kind of a storyline of a particular dictator, Abachas, right? And how that particular dictator doesn't allow the journalists or writers to have their open expressions. There was no freedom of expression, freedom of writing or speaking. This you will feel in even Purple Hibiscus in Adichie Chimamanda's. When the civil war was going on, and how those writings were burnt, but they had to smuggle memories to across. They faced hardships and censorship. They were forced forgetting of many of the bad things that they were writing. So writing became a resistance. Even Gugi felt that. Thionga Gugi, in some of his documents, would have expressed that, right? So then these are all some memories that we can never ever forget, and they remain within us in different forms and become as experiential narratives. And in certain times, as the pictures been shown to you, it is only folklore, oral tradition, telling frame, storytelling. That became the identity of a multiple memory recapitulation, and how those two people around would listen and they would propagate it to another person. Maybe a different imagery would be cropping in. So multiple narrators, how they will be competing memories of war and politics. They sit around and read something or just talk about something that lest others will listen. Code switching, moving from one language to another, one kind of an entertainment identity to another, right? Code switching is a kind of a linguistic identity and including of proverbs where a lot of memory is embedded in that language usage. Non-linear time, everything of war and trauma that will go against the chronological memory, the timeline. You say it is happening in a linear fashion. No, all of a sudden it may become abrupt. So metafiction is like, we say that there is a story within a storyline. Metafiction is a first person narrative, if I'm right. It talks a story that talks about itself as a story, right? If at all we take in an example, all the Nigerian writing is being like that at the foremost, right? So memory is, in the words of Julius Barnes, in his from his book, The Sense of an Ending, memory is a diary we all carry about with us. Yes, of course, that becomes biographical or autobiographical, but more so in fictional writing, they become extended storylines. So the problem with Nigeria, now I'm taking in some quotes from each of this writing. You can as well identify where it comes from. The problem with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. Yes, it was. When Adichie Chimamanda writes a purple, half the yellow sun, in half the Kambili is from purple, I'm sorry, it's from purple hibiscus, right? It's not in. I'm sorry. Sometimes, the kind of the timeline I have and the work scenario to do something very special, I sometimes make a slip. My memory fails, please. So there are some things that are so unforgivable that they make others make other things easily forgivable, right? The memory becomes a moral judgment here. The quote taken from the book, it talks about the national trauma, the rank and edit memories. You know why? It changes over a period of time. She was feeling the responsibility of memory. She, the protagonist, Kambili, in Purple Hibiscus, she full throughout, she will be telling you the story. It's also a very interesting story. It talks about familial strengthening dictatorship, the father, and then the outside world and how she gets lost to a priest and things like that. It's very interesting. So symbolic representation, right? Then they become episodic relevances of, when I use the word episodic, time and again it happens as a post memory. The younger generation inherits the duty to remember by that is how Adichie and Achebe had brought in the reference of those writing. You need to have to understand. You need to know how it is so relevant for the world not to forget. When we talk about proverbs, there are a lot number of proverbs in African relevance. Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. This is from Things Fall Apart, Adichie, Achebe, and it's an old proverb that tells, every old proverb is like a cultural memory bank. This is how Igbo culture stored knowledge before books. Okay, and there was a country, it's once upon a time. See, I would say once upon a time because people spend a lot of time reading books, but now it has become once upon a time. Similar is the thought that there was a country. One of the truest tests of integrity in its blunt refusal to be compromised. They never wanted to compromise with certain identities which were harsh. There becomes memory as ethical standards, ethics to life. Even when you do research, you think about ethics of writing, ethics of how to standardize your statistical presentation. You should not dwell into what do we call as what do we say as transgressing into somebody's identity. That identity you need to preserve. That is ethics. Remembering Bifra honestly is an act of integrity as far as Nigerian writers are concerned. You know why? Then imagine how much of hardships they would have faced, right? And that is how life became a realism to refer. In the beginning, there was a river. The river became a road, and the road branched out to the old world. This is the modernity that is reflected in Ben Okri's famished road. What is famished? Drought hidden, that cannot be used for any agricultural activity, cannot be walked across because it is scorched, right? But then here again, he brings the memory as a mythic, cyclical memory, right? We need to know there are so many ups and downs of memory in the Nigerian writers. It doesn't move in a linear progression. It is not in a straight line. Straight line is monotonous. So they bring interesting schemes within to make it relevant, right? And then interestingly, another writer, Sefi Atta, in Everything Good Will Come, she states, I wrote in my diary to find out what I thought. That is personal writing as a memory work. Memory bank is a diary. How individual records and how politics will try to erase a good leader's expression to writing. It happens, right? Many of the harsh sentiments of politics is right. Each one try to stab on one another, and that the goodness of one particular reader may not be accepted by the opposition. This is what politics tries to erase. Hello, Habila, it's fiction waiting for an angel. You need to have to understand how things about the past. I have already shown her the picture or the book title. It was always there waiting to be remembered. Things about the past remains there. It is becoming a kind of a subconscious identity within everybody's mind. Ask me to the time where I was born and the house and the place. Everyone remembers, and so I do remember. It is not that is a must, but I know the kind of the landscape, yes. So the things about the past that always there, and that has to be remembered for our own self-efficacy, like we feel happy about it. Realization, a direct statement on memory that we can take it, right? Even under a harsh realism, that is what we call in a dictatorship kind of a politics. Also, waiting for an angel, yes, there is that angel that comes in to relieve and resolve. So the past intrudes even under dictatorships. That is what the rhythm is. You need to have to understand how this becomes a construct. Literature investigates how texts construct, preserve, transmit individual and collective past. Even you can be a good writer of a memory study, right? Key learning outcomes, you need to have to know the kind of the narrative techniques that shapes the cultural backdrop, gives an identity, recognizing the unreliability of recall. Many times you recall things, but how concrete and true it is, it cannot be falsehood. Then people will throw stones at us, right? Unreliability of recall. So referential work has to be done before you recall something to the present. Analyzing generational trauma. Yes, I have given a picture identity for a generational trauma behind. I will reflect on that a little later. And how marginalized voices reconstruct history. Subaltern relevance is also there because of post-colonialism. You need to know cultural in values of memory, the generations of post-memory, writing and visual culture after the Holocaust. Imagine there is something you as a reader can give a reader's response to the realism. Kept as an archive will be a past brought into focus. You nowadays don't use a photo album. Every time I go home, I open up the photo album from the time that I'm born until now that my parents preserved. It is with one of the siblings. Why? But nowadays world don't believe in. They store it in the cell phone, digital, right? But digital storytelling, digital responses are also welcome, but how far I do not know. But once you preserve it, is like a lineage, you know the family tree, right? A culture after the Holocaust of a very bad happening. Nazis, Jews, they still have, right? Memory. That becomes an archive memory and a duty memory. What is an archive memory? You see in this picture, behind the greenery of the life and living, still there is a memory that can be remembered as an evergreen nostalgia, right? So the cultural influence gives us a duty memory. You take it forward, right? It becomes a genetic, what do we say, a replica of identity, epigenetic relevance. Religion, customs, history, language, knowledge, environment, ecology, all these are part and parcel. Anthropocenic identities are there in very many writers. Why? We need to know how much of memory that they have carried for them. No author is writing anything of himself without the memory. Need to understand beyond all concerns taken for discussion so far. It is to be well understood that literature and history are two interdependent disciplines that modify human understanding of the past and the present. They reimagine, restructure, reconstruct, right? Human experience. Maybe at times they deconstruct also to remove off some negations which can never be remembered. Document and interpret past events through calculative evidences, empirical. That's what I said. People will start to throw stones when we recall it differentially. So the two interrelated disciplines have become significant areas, right, of scholarly expressions and identities of the historical past and of the present that is taken into relevance and in practice. So if you would take as one theory that I would refer, Kathy Carrot's trauma, where she says trauma cannot be fully processed in the moment of its occurrence. It affects as often delayed, manifesting in symptoms, and that can be passed from one generation to another. I leave a small gap there for no picture or nothing. It's again, one particular scholar asked me, is memory a trauma? Yes, that can be the answer for this. So transgressional, if you would go across how they give rise to post-traumatic stress disorder, surviving European wars, surviving slavery and racial violence, right? In not even in American South, it can be in Oriental also, right? In African context, surviving famines and oppression in British India those days, and how this epigenetically been transferred from one generation over another, how people try to take it as differential negations to forget, they go for alcoholism, they trek into the trauma as alcoholic addiction, and sometimes a sexual abuse or an emotional repression also leads to, right, from the generations of the great grandfathers and to the present is being remembered in the family bonds. Low self-esteem has been one of the reasons of trauma, and severe anxiety, suffocating, shame, which cannot be discussed elsewhere. Even now in India, every day there is. Now back again, if I would talk about Adichie's work, Ulana, during Bifra, she talks about in Hibiscus, how the trauma is evident in her flashbacks, the moments of emotional instability. She struggles to reconcile her memories of war with the present. Ugwa, trauma is similarly portrayed as an ongoing struggle and his experience every day in his life, unforgettable, that it leading to post-traumatic stress disorder. When such becomes a disorder, they need medical care. So war's traumatic legacy is not confined only to the past, it is again in the present life. They navigate into our emotions, give us the psychological scars that we never can forget. So the court justified, I said, Ulana's, right? She is seen too much to cry, a psychological traumatic condition, transgressional over a period of time. And that has become the rhythm of realism. So naturally, whatever it is that we say and talk, African impact on memory, right, can also be taken as a study, mnemically, historical, cultural relevance brought into focus. You need to know. So the mnemonic reconstruction is essential not only in at the present moment of bringing things from the past, from the age-old past of the post-colonial influence, and how we are trying to redefine them into a realism of the present, and that comes out as storyline, right? And I've come to the last slide, and here, Trauma and Memory, Brain and Body in Search for the Living Past is a book that I said how experience can be written symbolically as a poetic sentiment. Here, memory is a lifetime of realism. It brings reminiscence of the past into the present, indelible, that cannot be forgotten and cannot be erased, right? And then memories of happenings of individuals and of all episodes, retold as stories to the macrocosm, read and frame imaginations. Some memories are pleasant and some unforgettable. Memories are a lifeline of reality. This is my thought on the discussion that I've taken. But then I have put certain words in full caps here. This is my dedication to one particular professor from GTN University. You know, unknowingly or knowingly, yesterday he said, Doctor, he also was a very good student of my father, and he sent this line to me. And only today I sent that particular link line to him to come in line. I sent the information that I'm presenting. He wrote this poem and said, Madam, Doctor, do you like these verses? I love to read this. Everything changes one day or the other. The winter doesn't come to stay, so does the summer. So many yesteryears have passed by as fleeting memories, many as good and a few not so. Here we stand, letting memories slip by, knowing not what is yet to come. Smile and let things go. The journey ahead may be more arduous. Shed off, renounce, as less the luggage, more the comfort, right? A poem that reflects the inner nostalgia of a human sentiment by Dr. Chakravarti, of a human soul. I show my reverence to all the professors around the world at this moment. I really feel elated to be I use the word elated is because of the memory that I can never forget. And this is again, many as good as fleeting memory of yesteryears, I still keep in my heart forevermore. So memory is the diary we all carry about with us. There, it becomes a book, right? Every book has a soul, the soul of the person who wrote it and of those who read it, lived and dreamt with it. We are all the dreaming scenarios. Why? Because we read books. Every time a book changes hands, every time runs through the pages, its spirit grows and strengthens in each one's memory. That is how a memory is a strong force of a realism for every one of us. Please. Thanks for all the forbearance to be with me this day, this evening. I thank you so much. I thank our founder, Dr. Chancellor, Dr. J.E. Aruraj, and under his protection and his blessings that I have uttered these words to you. And with all the DMI and MMI, DMI sisters and MMI fathers, I surrender, I dedicate my talk and to all the scholars of the day, and specifically to the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor of the University, DMI St. Joseph's, right? And my special pronouns to Dr. Dunstan for having given me this opportunity to be with you all this day. I revere. Thanks a lot. And thanks for all the scholars who have been here today and all the questions I would be possibly able to answer. I shall do so. But when you do research, please do real research. Don't go run around to catch things where AI is available. Even if it's AI available, try to rephrase them. Do it in the way that you are. Every person is unique. You have your memories. You have your knowledge, God-given gift. You have a beautiful set of allied professors and teaching staff. So this is my solemn thought to the researchers of the university. Thank you. And it was such a pleasure being here this evening, and thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving us a very beautiful presentation. I hope all the participants enjoyed it. Dear participants, it is time for you to ask questions. If you have any questions, please do.
Amma saying good night to me. It is evening for me. It's 4 o'clock. It's 16 hours.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Let me wait for some questions.
To break the ice, I think I can. Sir, Dr. Selvan, do you have any question?
Yeah, Sam, you can just read the questions. You can moderate them so that we can try to answer all the questions in the chat box. I
Yes,
see
sir.
a lot of questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir. Sure.
But will I be able to answer all the questions, Dr. Selvin? Anyway, I'll try my best.
Yeah, I think we will try as much as we can.
Yes, please, because it's beyond 20 hours there and people would be sleepy or hungry.
Those who are hungry will be with us.
For dinner. It's time for dinner. Anyway, I shall do so.
Okay. To break the ice, if I may, ma'am, is there any connection between the topic and William Ernest Henley's Invictus? Because the poem Invictus itself is a poem that is centered on trauma and kind of a cultural memory. Any comment on that?
But pretty fine. I have not read Invictus, but Invictus by itself is episodic one with the memory challenges being brought into focus, I think so. Is it Ernest Hemingway?
Ernest Henley, William Ernest Henley.
Okay, Henley's. And maybe I may not be, but Invictus by itself means dilapidated, right? Paraplegic.
Yes.
Things like that are cropping into that. That is why we have an organization, Invictus by Harry, Mr. Harry, the royal son of Queen Elizabeth, grandson of Queen Elizabeth, the Diana. His organization for a paraplegic people is called Invictus. They do a lot of work on that. Yes, it's true. Yes, naturally, but I do not know how it can be a memory. Maybe the experience of such a person can be a memory retold. Mr. San, I should say that.
Yes, ma'am.
If I am
Thank you.
very much near to the pretext, experiences can be taken as a recap of memory.
Yeah.
But the book by itself can be a memory recollection. Yes, Doctor.
Yeah, in fact, what Sam says, I think Sam, they have a very good relationship because the term is a Latin term that means unconquered or undefeated.
Yes,
the poem is talking about the poet who has lost his leg, amputation. After the amputation, he says he's not defeated. He's resisting the trauma and he's coming. It's the perseverance stuff. Yeah, we'll go to the next question.
Yes. There is a question. Memory enables creative writers to overcome their trauma, be it political, personal, historical, and cultural. Memory is therapeutic once it is written. It is more like a, it's not like a question, it's like a thing. Any comments on this, ma'am?
Yes, Sam, what I have been discussing alone was the concern of that particular question. Most of my PPTs had small versions of explanations or related to every political havoc, or like I did refer 1857, okay, the great tragedy during the British period. Was it not a political imbibed sequence that brought in remembrance as a reflection? Some of our Indian writers have written that, and when a creative writer starts to think, he starts to collect many identities relevant to the choice that he intends to do. Most people won't usually come up with harsh sentiments in their book, but still, if you will take Daniel Steele, Many of her writing as a fictional writer, 400 to 500 pages she writes, she will reflect on human consciousness, but at the same time, she will never ever make anything harsh. Even the harsh one, she takes into the relevance of nature. So then naturally a creative writer, the word creative by itself, you need to create a negation or a negative impact into one that can be accepted for reclaimed relevance. Whatever it is, we reclaim our lives through. Is it not so? That is again a practice that has to be done for any writer. It is again a memory. It should be a good memories. Bad memories can be readdressed. That, like, cyclic memories come around, but how we practically put it into our writing rhythm, that is important. We need to have an expertise on how to write. That comes with a lot of language. That's what I said when I was reading an article of the School of Memory Studies from Chennai. That particular person, I think I would love to send a soft copy to your college. The words that he used, some of the books that I read for this particular scenario, so very unused words, but they were so interesting. I did not use them here because many may find it difficult giving the meaning. Yes.
Yeah, thank you,
Naturally.
ma'am. And there is yet another question from R. Vasuhi. She
Okay.
says, Dear ma'am, is memory a product of traumatic experiences alone? Do we have any literature on sweet memories? Can memory be used for therapy? Can memory be used to manipulate?
She must read the writings of William Wordsworth. Papa, that is the answer I can say. Yes, that is. Sweet memories are William. If you read Daffodils, under
Yep.
the tree, standing by the side of the lake, and also is what do we say? Um, Lying on the couch with the memories around by the solitary reaper. That becomes the impulsive thought of a romantic feel, romantic sentiments of being with nature, right? And they are the sweet memories of human sentiment. But sweet memories are always lingering with us because the world is challenging now, right?
There
Such
is
a person
yet
is very
another
soft-hearted.
question.
Maybe Vasuki is a very soft-hearted person.
There is yet another question from Sagaye Abi. Greetings, ma'am. I really appreciate for raising Rwandan and Biafran civil war of Nigeria in your presentation. I would happy if you say something about the Ethiopian Red Terror in relation to trauma and memory studies, if you're familiar with the history.
No, Ethiopian authors have not dealt at all, but I do remember they were also having a lot of challenges and wars. Even now, on and off, they will have shootouts there. But I have got no idea on that particular revolution that it is happening. But Ethiopia is full of revolutions over a period of time. But here, the specification that I took in to reflect was because Rwanda, while flying to India, I always stop over because that is a beautiful country and it's so very clean and nice. And the genocide, I was having a fearsome sentiment. And Biafran, it's always there in all the Nigerian writers. And that is how I got acclimatized with it. Ethiopian, the great scenario of that particular impact was racial. It is racial, even now it happens. Though it is partly Christian, most probably it's one of the ancient Christian lineage that they have. It's a beautiful country, but it is still there. It is there. All of a sudden, it crops up. I feel that is racial by thought process. De-racialization is not there at many occasions. If I am bit very near to that kind of a connective link.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
So yes, sir. There is a question from Shiny Agnes. Ma'am, what is your opinion on healing when it comes to intergenerational trauma? Do you think when someone stops the trauma from being transmitted, there is healing taking place?
That is why we say let go, no? We do say you let go, give away, let off. And if the person is not able to balance that post-traumatic relevance, medical care is always a necessity. It becomes a biological intervention because the brain is hampered. They're not able to balance their stability. That is what I feel. And this healing is again our own responsibility, self, what is the identity that we need to construct against all oddities. I always feel it is a psychodynamic or analytic thought process. We need to have to reconcile. In some families, there will be someone all of a sudden cooking, they would have got burnt. And imagine the agony of the burnt person to recover. If that her own son or a daughter would have seen, they will still remember. They'll be scared to do. But how healing takes place? The confidence that they gather by the words from the parent, mother. If one example, I am telling you. So it happens. Healing is self-embodied. It is aesthetically need to be addressed. You have to observe. There are so many things of beauty around us so that we heal. Many are things we don't even imagine while traveling on the bus, on the road. There may be on the train. There may be so many syndromic conditions or traumatic conditions, but we try to forget and overcome and forget that particular realism. It is our mindset. That is what I would say. Healing is self-imposed. Yes, Sam.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful session. I think we'll close the session right now.
Sure.
And we do have Mrs. Narmada, Assistant Professor of English from St. Joseph University, to give the vote of thanks. Sir, this is a request to make her the co-host so that she can turn on her camera and mic.
Yes, please. You want me to go?
No,
Should I?
no. No, ma'am.
I-
This is
Yeah,
from Dr.
Narmada,
Selva.
you are a co-host now.
Narmada, ma'am,
Yes, sir. Yes,
the
sir.
virtual podium is yours. Yes, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes,
One
loud and clear.
second. Suma, ma'am, you can stop the sharing.
Okay, Papa. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Narmada, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. So, good evening, everyone. On behalf of St. Joseph University, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Sumati K. Sripati for her insightful keynote lecture on memory, studies, trauma, heritage, and cultural memory. Her expertise and thoughtful perspectives have enriched our understanding of this critical field. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to thank Dr. Lee Selvin, our convener, and Dr. G.M. Joseph Dunstan, co-convener, for their seamless coordination and warm welcome. Their efforts made this webinar series a success. Finally, thank you to all our participants for your active engagement and thought-provoking questions. We look forward to more enriching sessions in this series. Thank you.
Thank you, dear ma'am.
Welcome, Mr. Sam. Thank
Yes.
you. Dr.
Thank
Sam.
you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
you,
It was a wonderful presentation, and a lot of people would have benefited out of your erudite lecture. And thanks a lot. And all participants, thank you again. We'll meet next Saturday, 6 o'clock, the same webinar series. And thank you from St. Joseph University, Gentlemen.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. Good night to everybody. I'll go and have a cup of tea for me. Bye for now.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice, lovely being with you all.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Same here, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.